Hello everybody, Dead Spikes here, and today I'm going to make a video going over everything about bleeding in Elden Ring. I have been getting a lot of comments talking about arcane with bleeding, which is what inspired this video. I wanted to go around and do some testing on some actual things on this game. I'm not a fan of just hearing what people say and go with it. I do like to test stuff and get down dirty into it to know how everything works. So that's exactly what the point of this video is. Before we get far into it, let's go over what bleed is. Bleed is a status effect that has a bar, and once that bar is filled, it will deal a threshold of damage. It works the same way on players that it does on bosses and enemies. Now, I will tell you right now, I have done lots of tests on this in the past few hours, and I used the Sleeping Dragon for most of it. The Sleeping Dragon is an enemy that sits still, and it has the boss status that you can do extra damage to. And I'm going to tell you a few things I know about that before we get into our juicy tests. The first thing I learned was how much bleed damage does when it hits the threshold. With a normal bleed weapon that says causes blood loss buildup, and it doesn't have any affinity on it, when you bleed a boss out, it will do about 10% of their HP. When you bleed a normal enemy out, it will do about 33% of their HP. A few more things I learned from that Sleeping Dragon. I would show this on video, but it would take a little bit longer, and if you don't trust my word, then I definitely recommend you to go test it out yourself. There is no cooldown to bleed, so after a bleed has happened, or a blood loss, you have reached the bar, you can continue on for the next hits and not have to worry about a cooldown. Now, you'll notice as a player, when you have your bleed bar stacked up, it slowly depreciates until it hits 0 if you don't continuously get hit. It works the same way for bosses. If you hit a boss and wait a while before hitting again, the hidden bleed meter that you filled up will depreciate and it'll go back to 0. So if you are going to use bleed, you want to be very aggressive and not have any downtime. Now, the last thing that I learned from testing on this Sleeping Dragon is after every single blood loss, it takes more hits or more bleed buildup to cause the next blood loss up to the 3rd time. Now, the numbers I can give you on this was the first bleed every single time took 16 hits with an Uchigatana. Every single time I sat at the site of grace and came back, it was 16 hits. Now, on the second one, whether I waited or not, it was always 24 hits to cause the second blood loss, no matter if I waited or not, which means there was no cooldown. Now, on the 3rd blood loss, again, whether I waited or not, was 36. So it went from 16 to 24 to 36. I can't tell you if it does this for every single boss, but I would assume it does. Now, when I did the 4th blood loss, it was also 36. So assumingly the rest of the life bar, it will take the 36 to kill the boss. So it goes from 16 to 36, which is over double the hits it takes to cause blood loss. I'm going to assume it's the same for all bosses. So that's something to note later on, is it will take more hits. And again, if you don't trust the information I'm telling you, I 100% recommend you to go test it out yourself, and you will come out to the same data that I did. Again, I have spent a few hours on this. Now, what we're going to do next is I'm going to do 4 tests with the stat of arcane. People are talking all over the internet and everywhere about arcane and bleed working together. So I'm actually going to get down dirty, and I'm going to see what arcane does to affect bleed. Okay, here we are on our first test. We will be doing 4 tests to show arcane versus the bleed. Our first test, we will be using the Marred Leather Shield with nothing on it and low arcane. You can see on the right side, I only have 8 arcane. We are not looking at how many hits it takes in this exam. We are just looking at how much damage the threshold does. We are using the pumpkin head. Alright. You can see it did 200 right there. Let's do it again. Again, it does take more hits for the second bleed, especially if we get hit away from him. Trying to take it a little bit slow so it doesn't build up damage too much. There we go. 200 again. So both times the Marred Leather Shield did 200 with 8 arcane. Now we are on to test number 2. Test number 2 correlates with test number 1, and we will be using the same Marred Leather Shield. This time we have 99 arcane. So let's go up to Pumpkinhead and we will try it out. Please acknowledge I have done these a lot of times to make sure that I was accurate, but I do want to showcase it to you guys so you can see it visually. And we are only counting the blood damage when they bleed. We don't care about the impact damage. That was 200 once again. And we will go through it again. Again, it does take more hits on the second bleed. Okay, I'm gonna try to take this one slow so you guys can visually see it. I think it's one more hit or 2 more hits. There it is, 220. So it actually did less damage on that one, but that could be because my strength was higher on my other character. Now again, I can guarantee you that blood loss damage was 200. This guy has 600 health. So in these 2 tests, your arcane did not affect how much blood loss damage the target got. Now we still have 2 more tests to do. Now we are on test number 3. This is where stuff gets interesting. We now have the Marred Blood Leather Shield. So this is the Marred Leather Shield spec'd into blood affinity. You can see the blood buildup has went up, and this is on our low arcane character. So let's see the blood loss. We are seeing how much damage it does when we hit the threshold. $300 damage on that one. Let's do it again. $200 damage on that one. How weird is that? Now here is the very final test that all of you have been waiting for this whole video. We have a Marred Blood Leather Shield, so it's spec'd into blood to have the arcane boost. And now you can see this is on my high arcane character, and you can also see the blood loss buildup went up based off of my arcane. So arcane did make it so that it's easier to bleed a target. But now let's test out the damage. $300 again. 200 for the final one. So the actual blood loss was exactly the same with this on max arcane. So now let's finish up this video. Now that we have done all 4 tests, we can finish with our conclusion. So another thing to note is when upgrading gear, you actually do increase the blood loss buildup. So it is based off the scaling of the arcane on the weapon. For anyone curious that wanted to see this, Rivers of Blood at +10 with 99 arcane will do 79 blood loss buildup. Now arcane is only going to affect things that have bleed built into them. It will not affect any bleed weapons that do not have the bleed affinity on them. You can see if I switch back and undo, it's going to go back to 50, even with my 99 arcane. So arcane comes to play only with how fast you cause blood loss. That is the only thing arcane does. It also does slightly increase the damage scaling of the physical part of the weapon. That is everything I need to note about this video. What I personally think about bleed is it is good to use, but I do not think you should make a build fully reliant on it. Now that we have learned it starts to exponentially take more hits to cause bleed or blood loss on a boss, it's going to make it so you don't deal as much damage as you would hope. On top of that, there is a lot of bosses and enemies in this game that you simply just cannot bleed. And when you run into those targets while running a full bleed build, you will have a hard time. So I recommend to use it how I recommended in my dexterity build, is to use bleed as a backup secondary damage type and not as your main source. That will do it for this video. If you found it informational or helpful, please hit that thumbs up button. It does help out my channel a lot. I obviously didn't cover every single angle of bleed. I tried to cover as much as I could, and I hope it was clear and concise. I would love to hear you guys' feedback. Please tell me what you think about this or any other extra input you have. Please do not hesitate to comment. If you guys would like to see some more Elden Ring content like this, make sure to smack that subscribe button. I plan to be covering a lot more things like this and builds and tutorials. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye, this is Bikes out.